A very cool addition to the editor in Trials Evo is the ability to adjust the properties of the bike and rider. Let's take a look at that. In the editor, the bike and rider will always appear on the driving line next to the last checkpoint you had selected. So if you can't find him, just select the nearest checkpoint and he should appear right there. Start by selecting the rider and bringing up his properties menu. The first few options are a few basic object properties that hopefully by now you are at least a little familiar with. The advanced physics menu looks a little different than the one we covered in the object properties, but the only real difference is in the way you adjust the values. They all do the same thing as their counterparts in the object properties. Our first new parameter is frozen, and it does just what it sounds like. Freezes the rider, basically removing all physics properties. Generally, for maps that use the rider, you will want this box unchecked. But a bit later, when we get into triggers, events, and data sources, I'll show you how this can be turned on and off during play. And this is of course where the next option comes into play. Unfrozen type determines how the rider will react when frozen is toggled from on to off. With the default setting, when frozen is deactivated, the rider will just have physics return. If he is in the air, he will just drop straight down. But with keep motion, it will remember the motion that the rider had before he was frozen. So for example, if you freeze the rider mid-jump, the game will remember the speed and direction he was heading, so that when frozen is toggled off, he will continue the jump. Invulnerability should be another no-brainer. Check this box and the rider will be invulnerable to damage. Things like the force from explosions or a good healthy blow to the head will not faze him. When invulnerability is off, you can adjust how tough he is. A value of 100 is the default. Turn it down to 0 and the slightest bump will put the rider on the ground. Turn it up to the max and the dude will take a serious beating, but will still eventually fall once he takes enough hits. The next two options should also be self-explanatory. Uncheck sounds enabled and the rider won't make any sound. Uncheck rumble enabled and there will be no controller rumble associated with the rider. Finally, we have bailout force. This is the force that is applied when you hit Y to bail out from the bike. 100% is obviously the default. But if you want, you can crank it up so that he really launches off when you bail out. Or you can turn it down to 0, and when he bails out, he will basically just let go of the handlebars. Next, let's take a look at the bike properties. Most of these are the same as the rider properties, but when we get down to the bottom of this menu, we have a few more options. First is engine and braking. In this submenu, you can adjust the power of your bike's engine and brakes. These adjustments will be applied to whatever bike the rider chooses, and in this menu 100% equals the default power setting for the bike. So if you set the power to 150%, each bike will be that much more powerful. But since it's based on each bike's default, the Scorpion for example will still be more powerful than the Rattler. The other two bike specific settings we have to play with are headlight color and intensity. You can use these properties to adjust the color of the bike's headlamp and how bright it is. Keep in mind that the headlamp is a dynamic light. If your track is sufficiently lit so that you do not need the headlamp, for example a daylight track, turning off the headlamp by setting the intensity to 0 could help you get better performance out of your map.